The Holy Gospel according to John. Glory to you, O Lord. I'll begin reading at verse 7. So Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. But I came that they may have life and have it abundantly." This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. You may be seated. Today, as you heard me say at the beginning of worship, we are shifting our theme slightly from hearing God in the noise to discerning God in the noise. And I want to share with you this morning a little bit more about what led us here. Part of it, as you've heard us say over the last month, is the state of the world right now. There's so much going on, nationally and globally. For many of you, there's so much going on personally as well. We are living in a highly anxious time with the election just 9 days away. We are living in a time of fragmentation and loneliness where fewer and fewer of us even know the names of our neighbors. Many of us feel spread thin, like we just collapse at the end of the day only to get up and do it all over again. And while a part of us knows something is off, it's really hard to see the possibilities for living any differently. So is there a way to hear God and to discern God's movement in our lives amidst all of that noise? Just to put it right out there, I really do believe that our Christian faith has the power to change, to actually change how we see our lives and how we live our lives. Today is Reformation Sunday, after all, a day that doesn't just celebrate our Lutheran heritage, but a day that reminds us of the gospel's power to constantly be forming and reforming us and our lives. And so when I talk about faith's power to change us, sometimes it means a radical change in our life, like getting sober or adopting a child, or reconciling with someone with whom we've been estranged, or quitting one job and jumping into another field entirely that pays us half as much, but actually brings fulfillment. Some of us have those stories of God-given pivotal moments that change the course of our lives. But when I talk about faith's power to change us, I mean just as much the way faith changes the way we live our days, like these days, right now. What we notice, and the story we tell ourselves about what we notice, what we give thanks for, what we let go of, what we worry about, what we do with worry itself, the small, everyday choices that we make about our time, our care, our attention, and our words. And so an ongoing conversation that Pastor Reed and I have been having over the last several months is about what we might create here at Grace to help our community dive into this a little bit more. Because we know that for many of us, it is not easy or self-explanatory to connect our faith to the rest of our lives. The gap between Sunday and Monday, between what we do here and practice here and what we experience the rest of the week, can feel like an ocean, like two different worlds that really don't talk to each other. And if we don't wrestle with that a little bit here, we can start to believe that church is the place where we find God, and our personal lives, not so much. One of my favorite quotations from Barbara Brown Taylor is, "I do not go to church to find God. I go to church so that I can find God everywhere else. I, of course, hope and pray that we do find God here, but I hope for that so that we can also notice and experience God out there, where we live most of our lives. The other thing that I think comes up when we start to take a closer look at hearing God and discerning God are all the theological questions. Is God really active in our lives? How do we know if it's God or just our idea of God? And if God does call to us, is there a right way to follow God, or does God just move with any decision we make? When we dare to talk about God moving in our lives and even changing our lives, I think we often face some stumbling blocks. Many of us grew up with this idea that God was something like a puppeteer or an old bearded man in the sky who's just watching from above and making it all happen. That image of God as the designer of all things can be comforting until it's not. Until tragedy strikes, or we make a big mistake, or life unfolds in a way that makes no sense. Those times bring us to our knees and often make us question whether there is a God at all. And thankfully, what Jesus reveals to us is that, yes, there is a God. But God's power is not a controlling kind of power. It is a loving kind of power. A power that, out of love, gives humanity freedom. Freedom to make choices, to experience heartbreak, to love and be loved, to mess up and try again, and to discern God's voice in our lives. God has given us the freedom to be a discerning people. So what does that mean? Discernment, first of all, trusts that there is something to discern. In other words, life is not prescripted for us by God or by society. Life is ours to co-create, to participate in, to be responsive to. And so discernment is the practice of living a reflective life, where we pause often to examine the life that we're leading and to mine it for what it's telling us about God and about ourselves. Parker Palmer says it this way: all of the great spiritual traditions want to awaken us to the fact that we co-create the reality in which we live. And all of them ask two questions intended to help us keep awake. What are we sending from within ourselves out into the world? And what impact is it having out there? And what is the world sending back at us? And what impact is it having in here? We are continually engaged in the evolution of self and world, and we have the power to choose, moment by moment, between that which gives life and that which deals death. The word discernment comes from two Latin words: dis, meaning apart, and cernere, meaning to separate. And so discernment is the spiritual practice of trying to separate the true from the false, or the best from the good, or the life-giving from the life-sucking, or the work that is mine to do and the work that is not mine to do. And eventually, this practice of sifting, of separating, of discerning can lead us to more clarity about what is of God and what is not. So how do we do that? What are some tools for engaging in this thing called discernment? Today is the first day that our fall small groups are meeting, and just like we did in the spring, Pastor Reed and I will preach on the theme for each week so that small groups have a little more meat to work with, but also so that those of you who are not part of the small groups can also glean some of the learnings. So today the small groups will be talking about discernment, and they'll also be invited to try over the next 4 weeks the spiritual practice of examine. I love this spiritual practice so much because yes, it's spiritual, but it's also doable. Examine doesn't require careful study of Scripture. It doesn't ask us to find 30 minutes to be alone and to try to hear a voice speaking to us. No, all that examine is taking a few minutes at the end of each day to look more closely at your life, at the day that you've just lived, and to notice the moments when you felt most alive, and to notice the moments when you felt most depleted. Saint Ignatius, who developed this practice of examine, called these moments consolations and desolations. Consolations are the moments of aliveness in our day, the moments of connection, the moments for which we are most grateful, or the moments when we feel most ourselves. And desolations are the moments in a day when we feel the least connected, when we feel bitter or angry or stuck or lifeless. And Ignatius believed that both of these interior movements, noticed and traced over time, have the power to point us to God, because we learn something from both of them. Consolations can help us get clearer about what it is in our lives that makes us feel alive, that gives us that sense of connection to God, to others, and to the world. And desolations can help us get clearer about what is robbing us of life, what is sucking us dry, or what is causing us to show up for work or for our families in a less than healthy way. And so to do this practice of examine, the suggestion is that at the end of every day, light a candle, invite God into that space, and then just think over your day. You can do this alone or with a partner or with the whole family. Kids can totally do this. And then ask the two questions. In what moment today did you feel most alive? In what moment today did you feel the most depleted? Or for kids, we might adjust the question slightly to something like, what did you feel good about today? And what was a struggle today? Or when did you feel sad or alone today? And that's it. That's the practice. Whatever is to be revealed through this practice of examine typically takes some time. It takes time to get used to noticing those moments and recognizing them for what they are. And it certainly takes time to notice patterns, day to day, week to week. But what can happen by looking at moments that otherwise seem fairly insignificant is that we might start to see a pattern amongst our consolations and desolations. And that pattern might just point us to the way God is at work in our real, normal, everyday lives, moving us closer and closer toward vitality and aliveness. Because that is why Jesus came to this earth. I came that you might have life and have it abundantly. Those are Jesus' words. Jesus wants and hopes for us an abundant life, a life full of life, a life filled with consolations and desolations, both of which have something to teach us. A life that has moving through it the active and powerful love of God. Abundant life is not something we go elsewhere to find. It's embedded in our living right now. Only if we have eyes to see and hearts to feel, and then openness to discern where that seeing and feeling might just take us. Thanks be to God. Amen.